Just for the record, I will note that neither Mr. Gomez or Mr. Longoria were present when the case was originally set and called for trial. They're still not here, and they have not conferred or participated with the preparation for the trial with their attorneys. They are properly before this court, so we are moving forward with the trial. And with that, Mr. Knight, I think we can get started. Who would be your first witness?
Your Honor, I would like to start with Mr. Jesus Ortiz.
All right, is Mr. Ortiz with us? Yes, there's Mr. Ortiz. All right, Mr. Ortiz, if you'll please unmute yourself.
There you go.
Thank you, Mr. Ortiz. And Mr. Knight, with that, you may proceed.
May it please court counsel, Mr. Ortiz, in 2021, how were you employed?
I was an investigator for DFPS.
And were you in fact the investigator that in regards to this last removal case?
Yes, sir.
And how did the family come to the attention of the department?
Initially, we received a priority one case stating that there was ongoing domestic violence in the household, that there was ongoing abuse in the household, and that there was ongoing physical abuse in the household.
All right. Now, in regards to this abuse, what was the nature of that allegation?
It was alleged that the oldest female child was being molested by her stepbrother, allegedly, and it was also alleged that he was being sexualized by her stepfather, Mr. Longoria.
All right. And what are the age of the children in question?
At that time, Luciano was 12 and Harmony was 9.
All right. And what did your investigation reveal, if anything?
In that situation, we had the children we had the children taken to the Driscoll Children's Hospital. And while he refused the SANE exam, it was confirmed that she did have a very severe UTI. However, there was no outcry for drug abuse.
All right. And was she in a dating relationship?
No, she was not.
Okay. Now then, who was the oldest child at the time?
The female child or the child? The oldest child was Isaiah Watson.
And was he in the household at the time of removal?
He was visiting the household since it was during the summer.
And the next oldest child would have been who?
Luciana.
All right. And do you know whether or not the 13-year-old was in a relationship with anyone?
Yes, she was.
And who was she in a relationship with?
There was an older child, I believe. It was her stepbrother who she was in a sexual relationship with.
And how old was the stepbrother?
He was around 16 years old.
Okay. All right. And were there any other allegations that the department investigated?
Yes, there was also allegations of Eduardo being tied up to his car seat and being hit with a belt by both Mother Tabitha and stepfather John Longoria.
All right. And were there any allegations of substance abuse?
Yes, there was as well.
And was there any drug testing done?
No, the family refused to drug test when I asked them to.
And typically a refusal to drug test is considered to be an admission of drug use. Is that correct?
Typically, when there's historic drug use, that's typically an indication of ongoing drug use, the refusal to do so.
All right. And did you also have reason to investigate the history of the family?
Yes, I did.
And was there any history?
Yes, of course there was.
And how far back did that history go?
This history, it was over a 10-year span.
All right. And so based upon the results of your investigation, did you request a removal petition be filed?
Yes, that's correct.
And that petition was filed, and you also caused to have an affidavit in support of the removal to be created and filed along with that petition.
Yes, sir.
Your Honor, it offer states Exhibit A at this time. That's the original petition for removal.
No objection.
All right, any other objections at this time?
No objection.
Your Honor, that's all I have for Mr. Ortiz.
All right.
I'd like to keep him on for an hour or two, but circumstances will not permit.
All right. Well, let me then turn it over to Mr. Tiarena. Do you have questions for Mr. Ortiz?
Not of this witness, Your Honor.
All right. Mr. Bunch, any questions from you?
Yes, Your Honor. And I hope my video's gonna work here, although I'm not certain. Good morning, Mr. Ortiz.
Good morning.
I just want to make sure that I had your testimony correct. The initial allegations of sexual abuse, physical abuse that led to the opening of this case, none of those involved my client, did they? Mr. Gomez.
I'm sorry, Mr.
Mr. Gomez?
And yeah, that's correct, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay. So nobody ever made an outcry of sexual abuse about Mr. Gomez,
That's correct.
and nobody made an outcry of physical abuse or mental abuse, psychological abuse, anything like that?
That's correct.
Okay. No further questions, Your Honor.
Okay, Mr. Asari?
Yes, just a couple questions, Your Honor. Good morning, Mr. Ortiz.
Good morning.
As far as the sexual abuse allegations, were those eventually ruled out?
In this situation, we weren't able to determine due to the fact that the children did not want to be interviewed. And it was believed that it was in a way to protect their mother.
So the outcome for those allegations was that just unable to determine?
You know what? It was ruled out. I'm sorry.
Okay. And particularly for Mr. Longoria, were you aware of whether Mr. Longoria was on parole at the time that you're investigating this case?
Yes, I was aware.
Okay. And was he drug testing with his parole officer?
Yes, he was.
Okay. Were you able to look into those results?
Typically in situation, it's very difficult to obtain results from probation, especially from adult probation.
Okay. But at least you know he was testing somewhere, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. Your Honor, those are all the questions I have. I'll pass the witness.
All right, Ms. Linscomb, any questions from you?
Thank you, Your Honor. Mr. Ortiz, at the time of your investigation, you said that Isaiah was with his mom because it was summertime. Is that right?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, and where did he live any other time?
I believe he lived in the Dallas area with his father.
Okay, and during the time you had this case, were you aware of any problems or issues that occurred between Ms. Trevino and Mr. Malcolm Watson, Isaiah's father, or would that have happened after you were already off the case?
No, ma'am, I wasn't aware of any
Okay,
issues between them.
That's all I have, Your Honor. Thank you.
All right. Any additional questions for Mr. Ortiz? Mr. Knight?
Your Honor, briefly, Mr. Ortiz, you testified at the removal hearing, did you not?
Yes, I did.
And as a result of that contested hearing, do you recall who was present regarding as it concerns the parents?
I don't recall.
Okay. Now, the court did grant a conservatorship to the department. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Your Honor, offer States Exhibit G would entitled temporary order following adversary hearing dated July 20th, 2021. Your Honor, I have no further questions of the witness, and if there's no objection, I'd ask that he be excused.
All right. And with that, Mr. Knight, would you like to designate your next witness?
Your Honor, I would call Clarissa Perez.
All right, Ms. Perez. Mr. Knight, you may proceed.
May it please the court. Ms. Perez, what do you do with the department?
I am a conservatorship caseworker.
And were you assigned to this cause?
Yes, sir.
And did you cause to be prepared a family plan of service for the parents in this case?
Yes, sir, I did.
And were you also present at the status hearings that the court conducted on this case?
I was.
And did the court approve the family plans of service as presented?
Yes, sir.
And did the parents sign off on those plans and agree to them?
All but Mr. Gomez and Mr. Gonzalez.
Okay. So basically, you prepared a plan for Ms. Trevino, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
And she agreed to it, and you prepared a plan for Mr. Let's see, has Miss Morales?
Oh, yes, let me just recognize that Ms. Morales has just joined us.
Okay.
So we have Ms. Morales with us.
And you prepared a family plan of service for Mr. Aaron Terry,
Yes, sir.
and one for Jesus Gonzalez.
Correct.
Your Honor, at this time, I'd offer State's Exhibit C, which is a status hearing order approved by the court, and the family plan of service for Tabitha Trevino, State's Exhibit D, family plan of service for Aaron Terry, State's Exhibit E, and State's Exhibit F, family plan of service for Jesus Gonzalez. All right, Ms. Perez, when was the last permanency report filed with the court? To the best of your knowledge?
December 24th of 2022.
Okay. And
I'm sorry, October.
all right. And basically, it is a compilation which chronicles the progress of each parent in regards to the family plan of service. Is that correct? And in connection with this cause, could you list each parent who's before the court today and tell the court whether or not they were in compliance or not in compliance with the family plan of service as of this date?
Yes, sir. So Mr. Juan Longoria, he was not in compliance with his family plan of service. He did complete parenting, but that was the extent. Mr. Eduardo Gomez, he completed a psychological, but he is not in compliance. And Mr. Aaron Terry and Mr. Jesus Gonzalez did not work any services, and they are not in compliance.
Okay. And in regards to the mother, Tabitha Trevino, is she in compliance or not in compliance with her family plan of service?
Ms. Trevino did complete all of the services that were asked of her on her family plan of service.
Okay. And those findings are contained in the permanency report that's labeled as State's Exhibit U, dated
Yes.
October 4, 2022.
Yes.
I'd offer the permanency report this time, Your Honor, as State's Exhibit U. Ms. Perez, this is an unusual case, is it not?
It is.
Okay, because here the department is asking for termination of parental rights as to all remaining fathers and the mother, Tabitha Trevino. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
And I'd like to focus on Ms. Trevino because you testified that she is in compliance with her family plan of service. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
However, the department is recommending termination. Is that not correct? And why is that?
The department is asking for termination due to Ms. Trevino's extensive history and some behaviors that she still does not demonstrate any change.
All right, well, let's talk about that history because isn't it true that the best predictor of future performance is past performance?
Correct.
And you said that you testified that Ms. Trevino had extensive history with the department. And when did that history start, to the best of your knowledge?
I believe that her first initial came in 2009.
All right. And do you recall what type of case that was? Was that a removal or was it a family-based services case?
That case was, there was no determination on that case as Ms. Trevino was allowing her niece to smoke marijuana who was
I'm gonna
underage.
object. None of this would be personal knowledge at this point. If we're just gonna go through removals, go through the removals, but going every piece by piece, she wasn't the agent of the department at the time. She can't recall it. I wasn't even a lawyer. I wasn't even in law school yet. Like,
I'm sorry, I didn't hear the last thing that you said, Mr.
I was
Tiarena.
gonna say, I can't imagine she was a caseworker in 2009. I mean,
All right, so just so that I'm clear, was your objection lack of personal knowledge?
right, like she's just
Okay.
she could possibly have known those facts without looking in the file.
Your
All right,
Honor,
Mr. Knight?
she is the department's witness, and she is able to review the file of Ms. Trevino, the corporate file, the corporate memory of CPS to Ms. Trevino, and speak to it.
I'm going to overrule the objection. I think as the assigned conservatorship worker, Ms. Perez can speak to history in terms of the type of investigation and the outcome of that investigation. I think any details otherwise would be objectionable, as Mr. Tiarena has raised, but I do think she is in a position to recount past history and the outcome of investigations, the allegations and the outcome in formulating their recommendation today. So just for that, your benefit with that objection, and then for what I imagine will be similar testimony right now about other investigations from the past.
Ms. Perez, isn't it true that Ms. Trevino was convicted on 2 counts of delivery of marijuana to a child and also a count of endangering a child back in 2009?
Yes, sir, she was.
And isn't that in fact what spawned the family-based services case?
Yes, sir.
Your Honor, I'd offer State's Exhibit S and State's Exhibit T, which is the indictment of Ms. Trevino and a certified copy of the judgment of conviction on Ms.
She
Trevino.
did have an objection to T, that the judgment is not properly authenticated. The defendant fingerprint isn't there. It even says right above it, in accordance with the Code of Criminal Procedure, it's supposed to have happened. So either they have a wrong copy or it wasn't properly done in 2009. And ultimately, it's a very remote judgment to be pitching 14 years later.
I would submit it as admissible as a public document. This is a certified copy of same. And if it pleases Mr. Tiarena, I'll simply ask his client about it to verify whether or not she is the same person.
I'm going to overrule that objection. As a certified document, it is what it is, and she can be asked about it as well. So State's Exhibits S and T are admitted.
Ms. Perez, speaking about history, isn't it true that this is the 3rd removal of the children from Ms. Trevino's household?
Yes, sir.
All right. And if this is the 3rd removal, we're jumping around here, but I'd like to go back to the 1st removal. When did the 1st removal of children from Ms. Trevino's household occur?
The first removal occurred in February of 2015.
All right. And at that time, how many children did she have?
At that time, it was, I believe, just Lesiana.
Okay. But she has how many children total?
She has 5 children total.
And how many children were living with her at the time?
I'm not sure if Isaiah was living with her, but Lesiana and Harmony did reside with her.
And do you recall what the removal concerned?
The removal was an RTB for Lesiana for physical abuse. Lesiana admitted that Ms. Trevino hit her over the forehead with a belt buckle.
All right. And were there any other concerns that the department had with the home at that time?
And not that I have been made aware of.
Do you have the affidavit in front of you?
What exhibit was it?
From 2015, State's Exhibit N?
There was also domestic violence in the home, and Lesiana did not want to. She was scared to tell anybody of anything that was happening in the households.
All right. Now, the outcome of that case was this. basically, I mean, family plans of services were ordered. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
And in regards to the family plans of service, they would have been issued to Mr. Watson. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Mr. Terry, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
And Mr. Jesus Gonzalez, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
And also Ms. Trevino.
Correct.
Now, based on her history, who was the only person to successfully complete their family plan of service?
Ms. Trevino.
Okay. And so basically, she completed her family plan of service, got the children back. Is that true?
Yes, sir.
And without the help, for all practical purposes, from the fathers. Is that right?
Correct.
And do you know who she was living with at the time of that removal?
Mr. Gonzalez.
Okay. Fast forward, when was the next time the department intervened in Ms. Trevino's life?
The next removal occurred in January of 2019.
And do you recall what the basis of that removal was?
That removal occurred due to Eddie or Eduardo eating a baggie of meth in the backyard, which led him to be hospitalized for some time in ICU.
All right. And at that time, who was in the household?
It was Lesiana, Harmony, and Eddie.
Okay. And so Eddie was less than 2 years of age. Is that correct?
Correct.
And he was transported to the hospital. Is that correct? What hospital was he transported to the hospital?
He was transported to the hospital here in Beeville, and then he was taken to Driscoll.
And how was he taken to Driscoll?
I believe he was halo flighted.
Okay. And were tests conducted on Eduardo?
Yes, sir.
And what did those tests reveal, if anything?
Eduardo had ingested methamphetamines.
Okay. And was Eduardo's father in the home at that time?
No, sir. She was living with Mr. Longoria.
Okay. But again, a removal occurs, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And when the child made it to Driscoll, were there any other concerns other than the presence of methamphetamines in his system?
I was read in documentation, it stated that there was suspicions of physical abuse.
Okay. So in other words, were there or were there not bruises on the child's body that were unexplained?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And again, the department issues family plans of service. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
And Ms. Trevino was issued a family plan of service, was she not?
Yes.
And Your Honor, I'd offer State's Exhibit K. That's the family plan of service for Ms. Trevino in the 2019 case. Now then, there were also family plans of service issued to all the fathers in question. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
And again, how did Ms. Trevino do with her family plan of service?
She completed it successfully.
All right. And did any of the other fathers complete their family plan of service successfully?
No, sir.
Okay. And so that brings us to the instant case, correct?
Yes, sir.
So is the department's belief based upon Ms. Trevino's history that if the children go back to her, that she will relapse or go back to old habits?
Yes, sir.
And do you believe that's a fair assessment based on approximately 13 years of history?
I do.
Now then, let's talk about the placements of the respective children. Where are the youngest children?
The youngest child, Jonah, is currently placed in Corpus Christi in a foster home with his sister Harmony.
And how is that placement going?
That placement is going well. They love it there. They're truly bonded with their foster parents. Harmony is making good grades. Jonah's attending daycare. He was just potty trained, so he is no longer in any pull-ups or diapers. But the kids are doing extremely well there.
And we're talking about termination. If termination were to occur, is that an adopted placement?
Yes, it is.
And the foster family has indicated that they want to adopt. Is that correct?
Correct.
Have you discussed the possibility that if termination would not be granted, would they still be willing to take care of the children?
Yes, sir, they would.
Now let's talk about the rest of the children.
Okay, so we have Eduardo, who's currently in a treatment foster home in Houston, Texas. He's doing well there. He's making progress. They're figuring out what works for him, what doesn't work for him. But overall, he's doing good. He's bonded with those foster parents as well. They too have voiced their wanting to adopt Eddie, as well as his previous placement that has Harmony and Jonah. They too want to adopt him. So we do have 2 foster homes willing to take Eddie if termination is granted.
Now, let me ask you this. You mentioned that is a treatment or a therapeutic home. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
And what about his level of care makes it therapeutic?
Eddie was at first moderate a level of care. He was in Pamela Humfleet's home with Harmony and Jonah. However, his behavior was extremely disruptive. He has a lot of anger outbursts. He has physical aggression. He has sleep disturbances. He also has PTSD and ADHD. So his behaviors were getting to a point where he needed to be in a therapeutic home to help determine and give him more round-of-the-clock care to assess his needs.
And do you believe that his being in a therapeutic foster home is a product of his home environment?
I do.
Removal?
Yes, sir.
Okay. What about the next child?
Then we have Lesion is with her aunt, her paternal aunt, Regina Terry in Toledo, Texas, and they too are willing to keep Lesion.
Now then, should termination occur, would that be a adoptive home?
Yes, sir. They are willing to adopt if that's what Les is wanting.
And for the record, Regina Terry is the paternal grandmother of Lesion, is that correct?
She's the paternal aunt.
Paternal aunt, excuse me. And how long has she been in that placement?
She has been there since May 10th.
So the future plans for all the children, as the department is concerned, is to have them adopted into safe, stable, drug-free homes, family violence-free homes. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
And do you believe that to be in the best interest of the children?
Absolutely.
Now then, as far as the children, have they expressed any desires as it concerns staying where they're at or going back home, or what have they expressed to you, if anything?
She states that she wants to go back to her mom because she wants to be able to see her other family members. She wants to be with her friends that she had when she was with mom. Then we have Harmony, who goes back and forth, who says she'll go home if she has to, or she wants to go home, but she doesn't know what the future will be like. She's scared that mom's going to have more boyfriends, another baby. She's going to be the one taking care of her siblings. There's going to be more domestic violence or drugs. So Harmony is struggling a lot with what her future holds if she goes home to mom. And Eddie and Jonah are younger, so they don't really voice what their preference is.
But isn't it true that every child wants to have a stable home?
Absolutely.
Isn't it true that every child wants a safe home?
Yes,
Isn't it true that every child wants a drug-free home?
yes, sir.
And isn't it true that every child wants a family violence-free home?
Yes,
And basically, isn't it true that the department's position is based upon Mrs. Trevino's demonstrated inability to, for lack of a better expression, keep it together?
yes, sir.
Because that has been her history, quite frankly, all the time that she's been having children. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Your Honor, I'll pass the witness.
Mr. Tijerina.
Thank you, Your Honor. So, Ms. Perez, in the last permanency report, you documented her compliance, and was there anything on the family plan that she left unfinished or at least was still ongoing, like counseling?
She did complete everything. Of course, she still has employment, her housing. She's still cooperative. She was still attending her therapy sessions and drug testing.
So she's been going to counseling since the last hearing, correct?
I believe since the last hearing, she had 2 or 3 sessions. That was because the therapist was out on vacation the month of December.
But the court ordered last time you did reopen family counseling with her and her children. You asked the therapist to schedule sessions, right?
Yes, so they did have those.
And did those go well?
I think a lot of things that the children had to say were put out in the open.
Did Tabitha acknowledge her part of past removals and the reasons the children are in foster care at this point?
Based off of the notes that Miss Claudia sent over, she did acknowledge some of the, not everything was discussed. So the things that were discussed, Tabitha did acknowledge.
And that she also acknowledged that it was inappropriate for the older children to be mothering the younger children, and that was something she needed to work on, right?
Yes.
Now, as far as her bond, what would you say her bond is with the children?
I think her bond with Lesiana is, I think they have a good bond, but I don't think it's a healthy bond. I think it's more of Tabitha and Lesiana have a friendship instead of a mother-daughter relationship. Their conversations are not always appropriate. Her bond with Harmony, I'd say, is very strained. Harmony is very worried about the things that her mother will choose in the future. And when it comes to Eddie, of course, he's very loving with his mom when he has seen her. And Jonah is receptive to her. He does engage with her and hug her, and he does have a bond with her.
In the therapy notes, it shows, at least from the November 7th, well, the one we received November 7th from November 5th, she acknowledged that Lesiana should not be dating. She needs to work on changing her behaviors. Lesiana struggled with Tabitha being more parenting, and Tabitha did not back down of expectations. So she's showing, even back in November before the last hearing, that she's trying to do something different per notes prior to that, no?
And yes, she does acknowledge that she believes that Lesiana should not be in these relationships and things like that. However, sometimes their conversations and visits don't sound appropriate. Miss Trevino has come into visits asking Lesiana what the flavor of the week is. And that is not appropriate to have with a child who you are trying to sway away from having physical relationships or even any kind of relationship with a boy who, when Lesiana has been physically, sexually active prior. So I don't believe that Ms. Trevino can consistently parent appropriately.
But have you seen some growth from the beginning of this case to this point?
I've seen some acknowledgement. However, sometimes, like I said, her choice of words or conversations with the children are not appropriate.
As far as Harmony, did you also catch where she acknowledged in the therapy session that perhaps a lot of this comes from the way Ms. Trevino herself was raised, and that there is a pattern there that needs to be broken?
Yes, that was said.
That she was raising them the way that she knew how effectively.
Correct. However, here we are on her third removal and she's still raising them the way she was raised is not something that I think is her acknowledging the mistakes that she has made since we are here for a third removal.
But in the prior two, do you know if this joint family counseling that finally got to happen in the last few handful of months ever got to happen before, ever had been attempted before?
No, sir, I don't believe that it has.
And at least with the two that are older and verbal, do you feel like them being allowed to directly confront and address their concerns with Ms. Trevino has been helpful for trying to work through these issues?
I think based off of talking to Harmony, I think it's done more harm than good because Harmony has a hard time trusting and believing the things that her mother says based off of the extensive history that Harmony has with her mother. As far as Lesiana, Lesiana just wants to go home. Lesiana basically states she doesn't care what kind of environment she'll be in. She just wants to be home with her mom to be able to see her other family.
But is the department taking the position that Ms. Trevino is incapable of change to the effect a return to monitor would just not work out?
I'm sorry, can you say that again?
Are you basically saying because of the past, you're predicting that there's no possible way Ms. Trevino has been rehabilitated enough to parent her children?
I don't believe that Ms. Trevino has demonstrated enough change in her behavior based off of the small interactions she does have with the children to have them safely go home.
But from the beginning of your time on the case, did you ever give her the impression that she was going to be able to successfully be reunified with the kids?
I've always encouraged her to work her family plan and do her best because she doesn't know the outcome of the case.
But she's finished the family plan and you're still saying the goal.
Yes, sir. She finished her family plan in the other two cases as well, and we are still here for a third removal.
As to Lesiana, do you believe she would be safe if she went home? Is she old enough to take care, like to verbalize if something's wrong and appropriately, I guess, work through things with her mother?
Yes, she's old enough to take care of herself. However, I don't believe that Lesiana understands and comprehends the difference between the right decisions and the wrong decisions because she has been allowed to make so many wrong decisions while with her mother. I don't believe Lesiana has the appropriate guidance to keep herself safe based off of what she's been allowed to, the actions she's been allowed in the previous time with her mom.
And in the last therapy notes that are here, it notes that, I guess, a joint session between Tabitha, Harmony, and Lesiana. Lesiana was upset because of the conflict with Harmony, possibly affecting them not returning home. But ultimately, do you think that in that note, there's something showing that at least where it says Tabitha was trying to work through these things with more time, do you think the counseling would have better effect with Lesiana?
Lesiana has had a lot of therapy and has had been spoken to about what she needs to address in therapy. However, she states that she chooses not to address it because it's not going to change anything and it's not going to help. So I don't believe that any therapy that Lesiana has had at this point has helped because Lesiana refuses to put in the work. And based off of my last visit with Lesiana, she states she's going to go home anyway because her mom told her, so she doesn't think she has to put in the work.
And lastly, because we only have one session where Eddie seems to have been involved with the therapist from September, did you see that he was very excited to see her, he was not avoidant, very comfortable, that it went well, and that he connected with her very well?
Yes, Eddie did state all those things, and I am not going to take that away from her, but also Eddie is a very loving child when he is in a good mood.
Is there any reason, I guess, Jonah doesn't get mentioned anywhere in this?
Jonah is not very verbal. He's still building his vocabulary. He's 2 years old, so a lot of the things that we're talking about don't involve Jonah because this is only his first time being removed.
Have you observed the visits, or is it at the department office, or is it elsewhere? Like, have you perceived the visits with the kids?
Visits with Jonah and mom?
Yes.
Those occur in the Corpus Christi office being monitored.
Any concerns raised on those?
Not with Jonah. I think the only complaint we have is that there's a lot of sweets in the visits, but that's to be expected. Mom doesn't see them but once a week.
The last time Ms. Trevino got to see her children?
Ms. Trevino just visited with her children. Today is Monday. She visited with Harmony and Jonah on Thursday, and she visited with Lesiana on Tuesday.
So would you say those visits went well?
Yeah, they interacted. They were fine.
I will pass the witness.
Good morning, Ms. Perez.
Good morning.
Has my client been keeping in contact with you at all?
You have Mr. Eduardo Gomez.
Mr. Gomez.
He has not. The last time I had any contact with Mr. Gomez was in January of 2022. He stated that he wanted to work services, so I reinitiated those services for him with new authorizations. He completed a psychological. He drug tested for me once, and after that, I have been unable to make contact with him.
Okay, you've tried to contact him but been unable to?
Yes, sir.
Okay, and what were the results of the drug tests?
So he drug tested for me January 27th of 2022, and his drugs, he was positive for cocaine and marijuana.
Okay, and you said he also did an assessment. What were the results of that assessment?
He did a psychological, and I don't have those in front of me, and I cannot give you the exact recommendations.
Okay, but nothing you remember that stands out?
No, sir. He does have extensive drug use and history based off of the previous cases.
Okay. What about visitation? Has my client visited his child?
We set up visitation, but he did not participate.
Okay. Has my client ever attempted to interfere in any way with the custody of the child?
No, not at all.
Okay. You've never gotten a sense from him that he intends to break the court orders as relates to his son?
No, I have not.
Okay. No further questions, Your Honor.
All right, Mr. Asari, any questions from you?
Yes, just a few questions, Your Honor. Good morning, Ms. Perez.
Good morning.
As far as Ms. Longoria, going back to the two removals that you testified to, For those two removals, was Mr. Longoria in the household?
So are you talking about the previous removal from this one or all of them?
The two previous removals, I believe there's one dated in February 2015 and then January 2019.
Okay, Mr. Longoria was in the household in January in the 2019 removal. However, he did not complete his family plan of service, and him and Miss Trevino had separated.
Okay. And since the last permanency report back on October 2022, did Mr. Longoria also complete individual counseling?
He did. He completed individual and he completed parenting.
Okay. And as far as the permanency report back from October 2022, did you report that Mr. Longoria was employed?
Yes, he was employed.
And you're able to confirm that he was employed and confirm his income?
Yes, sir. I spoke with his supervisor.
Okay. And also from the October 2022 report, were you able to confirm Mr. Longoria's living arrangements?
Yes, sir. I have been, when he was cooperative and in contact with me, he allowed me to visit the home he was staying at with his sister in Portland.
Okay.
And the house was appropriate.
I was just about to ask you that too. Okay. And do you know if Mr. Longoria is still on parole or if he's off parole?
He completed his parole. He was discharged.
Okay. When was he discharged from parole?
I believe back in October or November.
Okay.
You know what? I'm sorry. It was December.
Okay. And was he successfully discharged off parole?
Yes, sir.
Your Honor, those are all the questions I have at this time. I'll pass the witness.
All right, Ms. Morales? Go ahead.
Have you had an opportunity to meet with Mr. Terry?
I have not met with Mr. Terry. I do have a courtesy worker who did meet with him where he is currently incarcerated.
Okay. And do you know when his release date is projected for?
When I looked it up, it stated in April of 2023.
Okay. And Lesiana is with his maternal aunt, and she is on today, Regina Terry. Is that correct?
That's her paternal aunt.
Paternal.
Yes, ma'am. She is here, yes.
Okay. And is it your understanding that Lesiana wants to be adopted?
When I have spoken with her about it, she states she doesn't want to be adopted, but she will be adopted. But she's older, so I don't believe that it's something that she's really swaying towards based off of my conversations with her.
And how old is she now?
She's 14.
Okay. And have you spoken with Mr. Terry regarding the Lesiana's future?
I have not. I know the courtesy workers spoke with him about where she was and how she was doing. And, those things are going well for her there.
Okay. And was Mr. Terry able to complete any services prior to his incarceration?
No, he was not. He was released, I believe, in September or October of 2021. And then he went back into jail for a little while. And then in December, middle of December, he contacted me and I submitted some authorizations. However, AS&J stated they were not able to get a hold of him. And then he was re-incarcerated in February of 2022.
And is it fair to say the department is not able to offer services while a client or a parent is incarcerated?
Correct.
So although he was out for a short period of time, the majority of the time in this case, he's been incarcerated. Is that correct?
Yes.
And the department is not able to work services with the parent?
Correct.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Ms. Linscomb, do you have any questions?
Thank you, Your Honor. Ms. Perez, while we're on Mr. Terry, isn't it true that Mr. Terry unfortunately has been in and out of custody or incarceration for a number of years now?
Yes, ma'am.
And he also has several children in several counties with several different mothers, correct?
He does.
Is it fair to say that many of his children have been involved with the department over the years?
That's correct.
And are you aware of removals of other children, including his child on this case, of course, occurring in B County as well as several contiguous counties?
Yes, ma'am.
Now, you testified that Mr. Longoria was in the home in 2019, the case where Eddie ate the meth, right?
Correct.
And then you testified that at the end of that case, Ms. Trevino had completed her service plan, but he had not, correct?
Correct.
And so when the children were reunified with Ms. Trevino, he was no longer a part of the household, correct?
Correct. They had separated.
Did they get back together after the case was over?
I'm assuming so because he's involved in this case.
Was he a member of the household at the time this removal occurred?
Yes.
Now, because of the young ages of two of the children on this case, we actually have two children here before the court who have spent more time outside of their mother's home and outside of her care than in it, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
And since Lesiana is the oldest child remaining in this case, she has obviously been removed the most times, correct?
Correct.
And if you are able to tell the court, can you share how many different placements Lesiana has had?
Since coming into care from the initial case and the initial removal, Lesiana has had 16 different placements.
And she's 14 years old today.
Yes.
Now, Ms. Bettis, you also talked about this 2009 case and accompanying conviction that involved allegations of Ms. Trevino providing marijuana to a child.
Yes, ma'am.
Was that child one of her biological children or a different child?
No, ma'am. It was her niece, or Erin Terry's niece.
And since 2009, when those allegations came in, has she ever been alleged to have provided marijuana to any other child?
That in our recent case right now, it was stated that she allowed Lesiana to smoke marijuana.
And as between the 2 FBSS cases and 3 removals you've had for this family over the years, how many cumulative hours of services has Ms. Trevino completed for the department to date?
She has had 230 hours of sessions with different counselors and classes to work on her parenting and individual counseling.
In your opinion, based on what you know about this family and your relationships with the children and the parents, do you believe that any real, true, substantial, or long-lasting change has occurred in the dynamics of the family or on the part of Ms. Trevino?
I don't believe enough change or demonstration has been shown from Ms. Trevino. I know that she has acknowledged some of the things that have gone wrong and need to change. However, based off of just some of the things she says or her actions when I meet with her or during visits, does not seem as though she has truly put in the effort or the work to make the changes for long term.
Now, you mentioned that there are lots of sweets being provided at the visits. Is that right?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, and while that may be a smaller issue compared to some, you understand that Eddie has had to have at least 7 cavities filled when he came into care, correct?
Yes, yes, ma'am.
And also at the time of the removal, he had an untreated lice infestation as well.
Yes,
Now, many of the things that Ms. Trevino has shared in court on the record over the years, if true, may have made us all hopeful that there has been substantial change, right?
correct.
You're aware, of course, that at the end of the 2019 case, that Judge Bauer admonished her that if there was another removal, it was not likely that she would have a successful reunification with the children.
Yes, ma'am.
And the cases that we had before, so specifically 2015 and 2019, neither of those were cases that were open for a couple of months and then closed out, right?
Correct.
So those were full 12-month or even extended 18-month cases.
Yes, ma'am.
Have you been present in this virtual courtroom when Ms. Trevino has made statements under oath to the Honorable Judge of this court about a friend or boyfriend that she may have been dating but is now friends with, or something along those lines?
Yes, ma'am.
And you're aware of that gentleman's name?
Yes, Mr. Leroy Aratia.
Okay, were you present when she testified that since it didn't seem to be like a good idea to the court that she be in a relationship with this man, that they had only been friends since that time?
Yes, ma'am.
And since that time, have you become aware that that is not true?
Yes, ma'am.
Specifically, have you reviewed and documented at least 5 or 6 different times on social media where they indicate that they're in a relationship together?
Yes, ma'am.
In fact, as recently as this morning, her Facebook profile still indicates that she's, quote, in a relationship, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
And right before we started this trial, he made a nice long post about what a big day today is and how they're going to get the kids back.
Yes.
Did some of these posts include her calling him babe?
Yes.
And do they include hearts all around the couple as they're being photographed together?
Yes.
Do you believe that Ms. Trevino was truthful when she testified under oath and told this judge that that relationship was not of a romantic nature?
I don't believe so.
And have all of the posts I just described occurred between November 12th of 2022 and today's date?
Yes, ma'am.
Is the department of the opinion that it is healthy for children to be continually pressured and questioned about their wishes and their desires, specifically when it is a parent who is pressuring them to say they want to come home?
No, I don't believe it's healthy for them.
Have you been made aware that during some of the conversations Ms. Trevino is having with specifically the 2 girls about coming home, that she has been trying to record those therapy sessions and those conversations?
Yes, ma'am.
In fact, she's had to be instructed that she cannot do that. That's not permissible.
Correct.
Does Harmony know that her mom is trying to record her?
Yes, she does.
Did she bring that to your attention?
Yes, she did.
Does that make her uncomfortable?
It does, and it confuses her.
Has Harmony shared with you that she has immense anxiety about what would happen to she and her siblings if they were to return home?
Yes, ma'am. And she's very fearful of what her future holds if she goes home.
Has she told you that she'll go home if the judge orders her to go home?
Yes.
Has she also told you that she wishes to remain where she is and be adopted?
She has.
Has she told you that she looks forward to changing her last name and having a mother and a father in the home?
Yes.
Has she told you that she worries for her siblings if they go home without her?
Yes.
Has she told you that she worries for the little boys if she and Lesiana are not there to take care of them?
Yes, she does.
Has she told you that she has anxiety about her mother repeating the same cycle again, meeting a new guy, having a new baby, and them all being removed all over again?
Yes, she has mentioned that throughout the entire case.
Do you believe these are children who feel free to express their fears and anxieties to their mother, or do you feel like they hold back because they worry about how she'll respond?
I believe they do hold back. They're scared as to hurting mom's feelings or her not being supportive of how they feel. And especially Harmony. Harmony is, I know, loves her mom, but is also wanting to have some permanency in her life.
And the department's goal at this time is for Lesiana to achieve permanency there with her Aunt Miss Terry, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
And whether that is going to be by means of adoption or PMC to Miss Terry at some future point, you believe that that is the best permanency option for Lesiana.
I do.
And likewise, as to Harmony and Jonah, you believe that their best permanency option would be to be adopted in the Humfleet foster home?
Yes.
And if the children are not legally free for adoption, you believe that remaining in that home would still be in their best interest?
Absolutely.
And finally, of course, for Eddie, the department's goal for him at this time is for him to complete his treatment plan at the TFC home, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
And your goal at this time is if and when it's therapeutically recommended for him, that he should be rejoined with his siblings.
Correct.
In the event that it's not therapeutically recommended for him and the department has to seek another goal, do you believe it would still be best for him to remain in the Franklin foster home where he is today, that is a safe option for him and could provide him with permanency even if parental rights were not terminated?
Yes, ma'am.
I think that's all I have at this time, Your Honor. I'll pass the witness.
Additional questions for Ms. Perez?
Yes, Your Honor, I have some follow-up. Ms. Perez, if you would, when you testified earlier that Ms. Trevino is in compliance with her family plan of service as of this date, that isn't to say that there have not been problems during the case, is that correct?
Correct.
And in fact, notwithstanding her conviction for delivery of marijuana to a child, she did test positive for marijuana during the pendency of our case, did she not?
She did.
And you recall how many times she tested positive for marijuana?
At least 3 or 4 times. And then we did have, no, I'm lying. She tested positive twice and 2 of them were negative dilutes.
Okay. So we had 2 positives and 2 questionable UAs, is that correct?
Yes.
Now, in regards to the fathers, in connection with this case, did you have an opportunity to review their criminal history, if any?
They all have criminal history.
And however, that's a pretty global statement, and they all deserve personal attention. Regarding Jesus Gonzalez, do you recall what his criminal history is, if anything?
Mr. Gonzalez has driving while intoxicated on his criminal history. He also has been on probation. He has.
Do you recall how many convictions he has, if any, for DWI?
I don't recall how many, but I know he does have at least 1.
All right. In regards to Eduardo Gomez, what is his criminal history, if any?
Mr. Gomez's criminal history has burglary, has drug charges. He also has he failed to identify himself. He has several burglary of habitations on his record as well.
All right. How about Mr. Terry?
Mr. Terry has extensive criminal history that has had him incarcerated with TDCJ on several occasions. His most recent criminal history includes him taking the police department on a high-speed chase through Beeville and Toledo, as well as some assault charges on the mother to his children, and cutting his ankle monitor are the most recent ones. But he does have drug charges, evading arrest.
And
Yeah.
what about Mr. Longoria?
Mr. Longoria does have some criminal history of, he was on probation and did serve some time in jail. He's got credit card abuse. He's got evading arrest. He's got driving while intoxicated, criminal trespassing, assault causing bodily injury to a family member.
Well, let me ask you this. Basically, have any of the fathers in the cause before the court been a factor in their children's life?
They have not really been a part of their kids' lives.
Okay. And have any of the fathers in this instant case successfully completed their family plan of service?
No, they have not.
Do you believe that the fathers, by their actions or inactions, engaged in conduct which endangered the physical or emotional well-being of their children?
I do.
And do you believe that's either by direct action or simply by leaving them in the care and custody of their mother?
Yes.
And isn't it true that basically all these fathers were aware of Miss Trevino's history and her lifestyle?
Yes, sir.
Because isn't it true that basically they pursue many of the same lifestyle problems that she does? Is that a fair statement?
Yes.
And given the fact that none of them have shown enough interest to do something significantly positive for any extended period of time regarding their children, do you believe that their parental rights should survive this hearing?
I do believe so.
That is to say, should their parental rights be terminated, yes or no?
Yes.
And you believe that based on best interest?
Yes, sir.
And do the children that are before the court today, do any of them have a true bond with their father?
No, they do not.
And as a practical matter, if it wasn't for Ms. Trevino's efforts, they would not have survived this far. Is that a fair statement?
That's fair.
But given the history, because again, by way of review, basically Ms. Trevino's had 2 family plans of services, 2 FBS cases, is that correct?
Yes, she has.
And she's had 3 removals, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
And as Ms. Linscomb asked you, basically these were not necessarily 1-year removal cases. They were all for the full length of time, were they not?
Yes, sir.
And in fact, based on her 2009 conviction, she spent a year away from the children's lives in the RC Center at Senton, did she not?
I spoke with her yesterday.
Restitution Center.
Oh, yes, she was in the restitution center for 5 months. And she was on probation for 7 years.
So notwithstanding the fact that, she had that case, she's on probation for 7 years. No matter how much supervision she gets, she continues to have the same problems. Is that a fair statement?
Yes.
And you believe if the children were allowed to go back to her today, that she would go on her way to reoffend again, so to speak?
Yes, sir.
And do you believe the children deserve something better than that?
I do.
You think the children have to wait forever for their parents, or in this case, or whether mom or dad, to get their act together and do a proper parenting job?
No, they should not have to.
And the department has plans in place for all the respective children, before the court that you believe would further their best interest. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
That is to say, they would be insured of a safe home. Is that true?
Yes,
They would be insured of a stable home. Is that true?
yes,
They would be insured of a drug-free home. Is that true?
yes,
And they would also be insured of a home free from family violence.
yes.
You believe it's just time to put an end to this sad parade?
I do.
That's all I have. Thank you, Your Honor.
So Ms. Perez, what is the specific behavioral change you would have wanted to see during your time on this case to have even staff to change the goal from termination to reunification?
Really consistent, appropriate change with her interaction with the children. There was always something that needed to be addressed. There was always something that I had to talk to the children about to clarify, to help them understand something that was said or done at the visit. And I think had Miss Trevino truly showed the change that needed to happen, her children wouldn't still be questioning certain things that have occurred, and fearful that they will still occur.
And I guess at the reasons for removal, it was a lot of it coming from Mr. Longoria and his son, but are they still in the home? Do you know if they still have any kind of contact with Mr. Trevino?
I know they would speak briefly to discuss Jonah. However, when I was able to last speak with Mr. Longoria, he stated they no longer had contact with one another.
Okay, so that addressed one of the reasons of removal, and she's tested negative on her marijuana. Was there any other drugs that she's tested positive for during your time on the case?
No,
Has she been addressed to how to appropriately discipline the children by any of her therapists, since one of the allegations was about allegedly Eduardo being left in a car seat?
yes, that was addressed in her previous case, when she did her family service plan for that case. Things have been addressed. Parenting has been addressed in this case as well, of course. So I cannot tell you if she will actually demonstrate that in the future if the kids are returned home. However, Eddie was strapped in the car seat when he was a child, a little boy, as well as Jonah too was strapped in the car seat at the investigation of this case.
Right, but have you addressed that with Ms. Trevino? Do you believe with any kind of certainty she would do that again, given the chance?
Yes, that has been discussed, and Ms. Trevino states that she knows that wasn't the best way to do it, but that was what she knew at the time.
Longoria and his son are out of the home and not in contact. She is negative, and she has learned, or at least been given direction on appropriate discipline should she ever have the children back in the home. What of the allegations that led to this removal, other than history that can't be changed, has she not addressed?
I believe she has covered all of the issues that we have concerns about. However, based off of her history, things have not changed. And I don't believe that they will go in a positive manner for the children if they are returned home. And I don't believe that the children should live in fear of being removed by CPS again because of something that their parent has or hasn't done. And I don't believe that Ms. Trevino has truly acknowledged the true extent of the faults she has in the parenting of her children. So I don't believe that it is in their best interest to return home.
But at least 3 of these therapies mentioned that she addressed that the older children should not be parenting the younger children. Her choices in past relationships have obviously led to a lot of these issues with her children. And obviously her choices in men in the past, she gives acknowledges that those were poor choices, and even the therapist said she acknowledges the past relationships were problematic. Whereas earlier therapy notes said the opposite before, I guess, the family counseling started, that she didn't take responsibility. So if that too has shown an upward trajectory and progress has been made, why is it that still there's nothing she could have done to address that would have changed the department's position?
Well, I didn't say there was nothing that she couldn't do. I did state that she could do some things that would change the consistent positive in visits with her children, not talking inappropriately to them, not having discussions about the case and who wants to go home, who doesn't want to go home, putting pressure on her children to return home to her. That is a severe concern as far as their mental health. Harmony really struggled with that when that occurred. Harmony had a lot of anxiety, had to go to the doctor, had to leave school because of that incident. And if Miss Trevino was able to actually demonstrate a change, she would have known how detrimental that could have been to her child and her mental health. As far as her showing any kind of change, she stated to the court that she was not in a relationship with the man that she was asked to remove from her life because of the concerns. But as today, this morning, we saw that she does still have some sort of relationship with him that seems to be a romantic relationship. So I believe that if she did truly acknowledge that she needed to do what was in the best interest of her children, she would not still have that type of relationship with that man.
Go first.
Just one, Judge. Isn't it true that with regard to Lesiana Trevino, her permanency goals can be achieved through PMC and not having to terminate Mr. Terry's rights?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. No further questions, Your Honor.
All right. Ms. Linscomb. Oh, sorry, let me let you go first.
All right, sorry. Just a few more questions. For Mr. Longoria, is it true that the majority of his criminal history was for offenses from over 10 years ago?
Yes, he did have a lot of old criminal history. And Mr. Longoria has shown change, especially when I was visiting with him in the last few months that he let me visit with him. But I did speak with him last month, and he did, because I was not able to make contact with him like I normally am. And he did state that he did not want to continue to try, that he knew Jonah were in the best place possible, and he wanted to leave it at that.
And as far as the time of removal for this case, is it true that Mr. Longoria and Jonah, they were in the same household?
Yes.
Okay. And is it true that Mr. Longoria was in the same household with Jonah since Jonah was born?
Yes, I believe there was a period where he did leave, but they did get back together.
Okay. So up to the point of removal, would you say that Mr. Longoria was an absent parent?
Yes.
That he was an absent parent?
He throughout the case, there was a long period of months where he did not visit with Jonah. He moved back home and he was back on drugs, and so he did not have. There was several months where he did not visit with Jonah, and then when we did initiate visitation again, he visited with him for about a month and a half, and then just stopped showing up for visits.
I got objected, not responsive. I was asking about. I'm sorry.
Well, I'll sustain that. Just Ms. Perez, listen to the question. I think he was speaking to time before removal.
Oh, okay.
The point up to the point of removal, would you say that Mr. Longoria was an absent parent?
No, he was not. He was present.
Okay. I think I heard you testify that Eduardo and Jonah were tied to a car seat.
In the previous case that came in, that was one of the allegations was Eduardo was also strapped to a car seat inside the home for behavior. And also at the intake, an initial investigation for this case, it was stated that Jonah as well had been put into a car seat and strapped in there in the home.
Okay. Because as far as the removal affidavit for this case, is it true it only mentions that Eduardo was strapped in a car seat?
Yes, but reading documentation, it states that Jonah too was found to be, I believe this was after the investigation was complete, after the adversary hearing.
No further questions, Your Honor. I'll pass the witness.
Thank you. Ms. Perez, are you able to communicate with young Eddie effectively?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Has he ever stated anything along the lines of he never wants to see his father, Mr. Gomez, again?
No, sir. He never mentions his dad, nor does he mention his mom. But I don't know why that is, but I can't really testify as to what he would like.
Okay. No further questions, John.
Do you recall what the concerns were about this most recent gentleman that Ms. Trevino got involved with?
The concerns with him were that he served 20 years in prison for assault, aggravated assault with a deadly weapon, and engaging in organized criminal activity. He also had aggravated robbery, and also he was found with a deadly weapon while he was incarcerated, and he was released. He served his full sentence due to, I believe, the weapon in the institution.
Are you aware of whether or not Harmony in the last few months wrote a letter to the court?
She did.
Would you be asking the court today to take that into consideration in making a decision today?
Yes, ma'am.
That's all I have, Your Honor. I'll pass the witness.
One question of my own, just so that I am clear. Both Mr. Ortiz and you, Ms. Perez, referenced Lesiana being in a sexual relationship with her stepbrother. Can you clarify to me, was she 13 at the time?
Yes, she was younger. Yes, ma'am.
And did she at any point in this case indicate to you or anyone else how long that relationship had been ongoing?
She did not. When I spoke with her about it, she said it wasn't a big deal. Her mom knew about it. And at some point she stated that she wanted to have a baby.
All right. Any other questions for Ms. Perez?
Few follow-up, Your Honor.
All right, Mr. Knight.
In regards to Lesiana, Ms. Perez, isn't it true that at one point in time during the initial case, it was thought that she was pregnant?
Yes, sir.
And a pregnancy test was administered and she was found not to be pregnant. Is that true?
That's correct.
Okay. But isn't it also true that you don't administer pregnancy tests to people who aren't having sex?
Correct.
Sex is still the leading cause of pregnancy.
It is.
Immaculate conception only happened one time.
Correct.
Okay. All right. In regards to Ms. Morales's point that the same goals could be achieved on the Terry child without termination, termination would enable the placement to qualify for help, but otherwise it would not qualify. Is that true?
Yes, sir.
And given Mr. Terry's unfortunate lifestyle, does it appear to you that he's ever going to be around or able to support any child?
No, I don't believe so.
Isn't it true that based on his criminal history that he's spent more time in custody during this child's life than he has out of custody?
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Pass the witness.
Mr. Knight, you may proceed.
May it please court. Ms. Trevino, first, I want to clarify something. Did you in fact get a conviction out of B County, Texas for delivery of marijuana to a child?
Yes, that's what I wanted to explain to y'all. It wasn't delivery as in like taking drugs and delivering it to somebody. It was, I allowed Aaron Terry's sister to smoke with me one time. And then another time they said it twice because apparently Shannon Terry and Cheyenne Terry decided to throw another one in there to try to make me look bad. So I ended up getting two instead of one. But
Let
I
me
did
ask
it.
you something. How old was the child in question?
She was about 13, 14 at the time. And I was about 18, 19 probably.
Okay. But basically, that's what started your first family-based services case, isn't that true?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And you were on probation for a time, and part of that, your terms, condition probation placed you in Senton in the restitution center for a year.
No, sir. I was there for a month and a half. And before that, I was in jail for 3.5 months before they sent me to Sinton. I was never locked up for a whole year.
Okay. Now then, if I recall correctly, you've got two family-based services cases, and I show the first one starting in October of 2009 and ending in December of 2009. Does that sound correct to you?
No, the first case was about 8 months.
Okay, but I understand it took some time, but do I have the year right? It was in 2009?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And the next one was sometime later, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
According to my records, I'm showing that basically you had a family-based services case open from April of 2010 to January 2011. Does that sound about right?
No, the next case was 2015.
Well, I'm talking about family-based services. I'm not talking about the removal.
2010.
Well, let's see. Let's move on to the removal because we don't disagree about that. All right. The 2015 removal started when your daughter was hit in the head with a belt. Is that correct?
Yes, sir. It was on accident, though not on purpose.
All righty. And but is it true when your daughter said that Mr. Gonzalez had put you up against the wall and choked you during your relationship?
Yes, sir. That was true.
Okay. And and isn't it true that scared Lysiana, I mean, for you and for herself?
Yes, scared all of us.
Okay. And in fact, isn't it true, Lysiana also reported that he left a handprint on you from striking you. Is that true?
As in probably on my neck, a little redness, probably.
Okay.
Yes.
All righty. So basically, I mean, that removal was had. How long? I mean, you and Mr. Gonzalez were together at the time of removal. Is that correct?
Yes.
How long did he stay with you after the removal occurred?
To be honest, I don't remember.
Okay. But is it fair to say that y'all broke up?
We broke up after I think it was during the case I had broke up with him.
Okay. And that was in 2015. And the next removal case is 2019. And
Yes, sir.
what caused that one?
Yes, my son was playing outside. He had took a long nap and we took him outside to play. And at the time, John Longoria was around, but he hadn't moved in with me yet. But we were outside and he was running around and there was a little piece of paper, I guess, that he grabbed off the ground by one of the storages and he put it in his mouth. But when I was chasing him around and I saw him put something in his mouth, so I scooped it out of his mouth. But I guess by the time I did, whatever was there, it had already absorbed in his mouth and I found out that it was meth.
Well, wasn't it true that Mr. Longoria was a meth user?
Yes, he was.
And the department felt that basically your child was exposed to meth by Mr. Longoria? I'm sorry, I think you froze.
To be honest, this day I still who it was. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. Till this day, I still don't know whether that was his baggie that was out there or if it was somebody else walking through there. I mean, because we did have a lot of drug addicts walking through there. It was housing, it was apartments, you know what I mean? So, I mean, people walk through there all the time, but I don't know for sure if it was John's or if it was somebody else's. I still don't know. He says it wasn't, but
But you
I
would
have
agree
no.
with me that he did have a problem with meth at the time.
Yes.
Okay. And
That's why we have problems with our relationship, because he kept using and I would leave him and then he would say he's going to try to get clean, and he would be clean for a little while and then he'd go back to using again. So that's the reason why I left him for good. Back.
in
Sorry,
regards
what'd you
to,
say?
excuse me, in regards to Lesiana, she basically had a 16-year-old boyfriend. Is that a fair statement?
That's what I was going to tell y'all. It was not her stepbrother.
And I
It
was
was a boy that she met through her. I'm sorry, what'd you say?
I was trying to clarify that, and I appreciate you bringing it up, because the boy that was allegedly her boyfriend having sex with her was that your boyfriend's son?
No, it was the one I'm married to, Eduardo, baby Eddie, my son's dad. The one I'm
Yes.
still married to, Eduardo Gomez. It was his girlfriend's son.
Okay.
I didn't know that they did what they did. I had no clue they did what they did until afterwards, where she admitted me. So I didn't approve of that also.
Well, let's talk about marijuana use. I mean, it was alleged that you allowed your daughter to smoke marijuana. Was that true or not true?
Oh, I didn't. I found out she was doing it at Eduardo's house. Found out she was doing it over there with that boy. She would go visit Ed.
But isn't it true that you were still smoking marijuana when this case started?
Yes, I have smoked marijuana before, but not with my kids or around my kids. No.
Well, I understand, but given the fact that it gave you so much trouble in 2009, one would think that you might change your attitude in regards to marijuana.
Yeah, that's why I quit.
Well, I know, but you're still testing positive for marijuana when this last case started.
No, it was one time that I did the CBD and I didn't think it was gonna come out, but it did. So it wasn't marijuana.
So the two positives weren't marijuana?
No, sir.
And
I explained it to them.
The dilute samples were not marijuana either?
No.
All right,
They told me it was something diluted. So I told them, I was like, I drink a lot of water. So I stopped drinking a lot of water and I ended up taking another UA and it came out regular negative. So I guess that's what it was. I told her that's the only thing I was doing differently was drinking more water. So, and my hair follicles have been clean. So
let me ask you something. In regards to the children's father, let me start with Lesiana. And her father is Aaron Terry, correct?
yes.
And has Aaron Terry been a factor in her life or helped you with that child?
Here and there. I mean, I can't lie. He's been there here and there, but not consistently. No, he should have been there more, but he wasn't. He's been locked up more than he has. The first 5 years since she was born, he was locked up in prison. So he missed the first 5 years of her life already automatically.
I understand. I was sitting in court when he bolted out of the jury box and got the escape charge.
Yeah.
It seemed like a good idea at the time.
Objection, Your Honor, to the sidebar.
I'll sustain.
And rightly so, Your Honor. In regards to Mr. Gonzalez, has he been around and helped you with the kids?
As when we were together and when he was doing right and not messing up or being ugly or whatever, he did help here and there, and he could be a good father and a good stepfather at the point. But after we broke up, he was not involved anymore for Harmony at all. Like, he does not pay child support, he doesn't bring her nothing, he doesn't ask to see her or pick her up or anything like that. So he hasn't been there since then.
All righty. And how about Mr. Gomez? Has he been there for his child or helped you with his child?
Half and half. Yeah.
Okay, what's
At
happened?
one point, sometimes he would, but his current girlfriend gave us a lot of problems, and so he was kind of there sometimes, and then sometimes he would like basically tell her, oh, well, you're not going to keep me from my kid, and then he would see him for a little while, and then they would go back to the old thing again, to where she was trying to keep him from him, and always causing problems and stuff. So he was not there all the time.
Well, is it fair to say he did not routinely visit?
Before the case happened, he was trying to pick him up here and there and try to keep him for the weekends and stuff. We were starting a routine, but then they got taken away, so we weren't able to finish all that
And how about
or
paying
continue
child
that.
support?
He helped me with like pull-ups and wipies, and whatever I said that he needed, he would go buy it.
Okay. And how
So
about
he helped a little bit.
Mr. Longoria? Has he been around or helped you with his child?
He's been around the majority of the time for baby Jonah, but he just had a lot of problems with the whole drug problem. So he was kind of in and out of his life. But while he was there, he was a good father. He did take care of him. You know, he did help out, as in money wise, or buying him what he needed, or, you know, getting whatever, like even if it's just a toy or something, you know, like he did help out.
Mr. Trevino, let me ask you about that, because you mentioned he's been a good father. Do you think you've been a good mother to your kids?
So what?
Do you think that you've been a good mother to your kids?
I'm not a perfect mother, but I did make sure they had food. I made sure they went to school. I made sure they went to the doctors. I did mess up whenever I picked the wrong boyfriends or husband or whatever. You know, I did do a lot of things wrong, but I did try to change over the years here and there with certain things. Now I see I have more patience with them. I have more ways of talking to them and getting them to open up to me. And I know recently Jonah had got, you know, mad about something because I didn't want to give him a piece of candy or something. And it was one of the visits. And I told him, I was like, look, you need to stop kicking your sister, because he was kicking his sister in the back. And I said, don't be doing that. And then that's whenever I was like, do you want to go to the corner or are you going to behave? And that's whenever Harmony was like, what do you mean the corner? And I was like, yeah. And she goes, well, Pam doesn't do that. Pam takes him to the other room. I said, well, honey, right now I can't do that because this is the only room I can be in. So I can't spank him. I tried talking to him. I tried calming him down. So the only other thing I can say is, hey, do you want to go to the corner and go in timeout for a minute or two? You know what I mean? Because they say it's about around their age appropriate, like 1 or 2 years old. It's like 2 minutes or something.
Excuse
So
me. You mentioned that when Lesiana got hit, that was an accident. You were trying to hit
Yeah.
your other child.
no, I was spanking Luciana at the time. That was when I did spank with the belt, and I was spanking her, and she went and she moved. And whenever she moved, I ended up, at the time I was trying to spank her butt, it went across her forehead and left a little scratch. It wasn't no open cut or no bruise or like, you know, she didn't need stitches or nothing. It was just a little scratch on her forehead, but it was accidental. It wasn't on purpose. I've
Miss-
never striked him in the face with the belt.
By my count, and I'm grant you, I'm an attorney and not a math teacher. It would appear that we've got at least 13 years of of history with the department intervening into your life to try to make sure that your kids were safe. What would you say to the court to convince the court that that if your parental rights were allowed to survive, that things would be any different for the future?
The only thing I can say is I've been trying, and even though CPS asked for termination, I did not give up and I kept going. I do everything I'm supposed to do as a parent. I do my visits. I have a job. I have a house. I have a car. I mean, I interact with my kids. I try to tell them right from wrong. I try to discipline them the right way and speak to them right. And, at times I would, the what?
Ms. Trevino, excuse me, but
I'm sorry.
if I'm not mistaken, didn't you say the same thing back in 2015?
I mean, I'm sure I have, but half of my problem was my ex and his issues. And that was a lot of reason why I think, doing what I was doing.
Well, did you tell the court the same thing in 2019?
What do you mean?
Well, during the second CPS case.
The second CPS was 2015.
I'm sorry, the second CPS removal. I apologize. I'm
Okay.
talking about removals right now.
I mean, I've always said that I'm going to try to be the best mom I can be. I mean, that's all I can do is try to be the best mom, but I can't prove that. I can't prove that to anybody unless they let me show them. There's no way to prove that unless I can show CPS.
Would you agree with me that arguably you've had at least 12 or 13 years to show this court or any other court that things could be different?
I was not under CPS for 12 or 13 years.
Well, that may be. I'll give you that, but the point is, we keep coming back. And CPS has to keep intervening in your family, and that's indicative of a continuing problem. Would you agree?
Yes, sir. That's my past, though. That's not the person I am today. That's not what I'm doing now.
Well, do you understand why the department is doubtful about your ability to keep it together for the future?
The what?
Do you understand why the department is skeptical about your ability to keep it together for the future?
Yes, sir. I understand that.
And not to be ugly about it, but how long is it going to take for you? I mean, how long are your children going to have to wait for you to get your act together?
Not no more. They don't have to wait anymore.
Well, if I'm not mistaken, I bet you said the same thing, in the prior two cases.
Actually, I've never said this till now. My kids will no longer have to wait for me to grow up. They won't. I'm ready for them to come home. I'm ready to be their mom. I don't want to go through this ever again. Ever.
Well, you have to, Mr. Trevino, you understand, I hear what you say, but, like I said, your history is against you because, saying something and doing something are two different things. I appreciate your words. Pass the witness. .